Between 1837 and 1901, Victorian Britain saw unimaginable wealth alongside crushing poverty, creating two worlds separated by just a few streets. The richest lived in opulent mansions with dozens of servants, while the poorest crammed into filthy single rooms with entire families. Here's what life was really like for the richest and poorest in Victorian England. So yeah, if these stories help you sleep, hit subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment your location and time. I always read them thinking, wait, people in New Zealand listen to history stories to sleep. All right. Tonight, it's Victorian England. But hold on, get comfortable first. Seriously, take a second. Adjust whatever needs adjusting. You're not going to want to move once we start. Your eyes flutter open to darkness. For a moment, you're confused. Then reality crashes in. You're in a four-poster bed in 1860s London, and you're obscenely wealthy. The Egyptian cotton sheets beneath you cost more than most people make in a month. The mattress is stuffed with the finest horsehair, not the cheap straw that breaks down after a year. Unlike your modern memory foam that cradles you perfectly, this bed is firm but still absurdly comfortable compared to what 90% of Londoners are sleeping on right now. It's still dark, but the blackness is softening around the edges. Maybe 500 AM, not that it matters. You won't be getting yourself out of bed. That's what the servants are for. Good morning, my lord. The voice comes from the doorway as the door silently swings open. One of your footmen, William, you think, though honestly you have trouble keeping track of them all, enters carrying a silver candlestick. Behind him is your valet Jenkins, who's been with you for 15 years. William lights the gas lamps while Jenkins prepares your morning routine. It's going to be a fine day, sir, Jenkins says as he lays out your morning clothes. Perhaps the blue waistcoat today. You mumble something affirmative and sink back into the pillows for a few more minutes of warmth. Your bedroom is massive, probably 40 feet square with 14 feet ceilings. The fireplace across from your bed is taller than most men, and William is already stoking it to chase away the morning chill. Here's the thing about being rich in Victorian England. You're never alone, never. There's always someone hovering, waiting, watching. Privacy is actually something the poor have more of, if only because no one cares what they're doing. Wait, let me back up a bit. This is one bedroom in your London townhouse. One of your 3 homes. You've got this place in Belgravia, the country estate in Hampshire where your family has lived for 11 generations, and the hunting lodge in Scotland. The London house alone has 32 rooms and requires 17 full-time servants to run properly. And that's actually modest compared to some of the true aristocracy. Will you be attending Lord Hartington's dinner this evening, sir? Jenkins asks as he helps you into your dressing gown. It's silk, of course, with embroidery that took some poor woman weeks to complete. You're paying her a fair wage, though. You're not a monster. Yes, I suppose I must, you reply, making your way to the washstand where a porcelain basin of warm water awaits. Lady Elizabeth will be there. Jenkins nods knowingly. Lady Elizabeth is the daughter of the Earl of Westmand, and your mother has been not so subtly pushing you toward a match. She comes with an impressive dowry, impeccable bloodlines, and from what you've seen at previous social events, the personality of a wet dishcloth. But such is life in your social circle. Marriage is business, not romance. Very good, sir. I'll prepare your evening attire accordingly. Speaking of attire, let's talk about the ridiculous amount of clothing you wear. Right now, you're just putting on your morning outfit, which is considered casual, but would be formal by today's standards. You start with a linen shirt, followed by wool trousers held up by suspenders. Then comes the waistcoat, the jacket, and the cravat, which Jenkins ties with expert precision. For footwear, you have leather boots that cost as much as a laborer makes in 3 months. And this is just your morning outfit. You'll change clothes at least 3 more times today. I know you're thinking this sounds exhausting, but remember, you're not doing any of this yourself. Jenkins is dressing you like you're a life-size doll. While this is happening, the rest of the house is already humming with activity. The servants have been up since 4:30 a.m. preparing for the day. The cook and kitchen maids are making breakfast. The housemaids are dusting the drawing rooms and parlours. The footmen are polishing silver. The stable boys are tending to your horses. You make your way downstairs to the morning room where breakfast is served. Your wife is already there looking immaculate despite the early hour. She too has been attended to by her lady's maid, who spent nearly an hour arranging her hair and helping her into her morning dress. "Good morning, my dear," she says, not looking up from her correspondence. She has several letters open in front of her, invitations to balls, charity events, and afternoon teas. The social calendar of a wealthy Victorian woman is relentlessly full. The breakfast table is laden with food, eggs, bacon, kidneys, fish, toast, muffins, and fresh fruit. In an era before refrigeration, this spread represents significant work and expense. Your cook has been preparing since dawn, and the food is kept warm on heated serving trays. "Jenkins tells me we're attending the Hartingtons tonight," your wife says, finally looking up. She's pretty in that particular Victorian way. Pale skin, a small waist cinched even smaller by her corset, and a serene expression that reveals nothing of her true thoughts. "Yes, I thought we might," you reply, helping yourself to some eggs. A footman immediately appears to pour you tea. "Lady Elizabeth will be there," she says, with a small smile. Your wife is well aware of your mother's matchmaking efforts on behalf of your brother and her cousin, Lord James. He's quite handsome, I hear. You raise an eyebrow at her teasing. This is what passes for humour in your marriage. Gentle, proper, and never inappropriate. You've been married for 12 years, a match arranged by your parents. She brought land and connections to the marriage. You brought title and wealth. It's worked out better than many such arrangements. You're fond of each other, if not passionately in love. Okay, hold that picture in your mind. Now, let's completely flip the script. Same morning, same city, but you're not waking up in Belgravia. You're waking up in Seven Dials, one of London's most notorious slums. Your eyes open to darkness, but it's not the peaceful darkness of a well-appointed bedroom. It's the murky gloom of a basement room shared with 8 other people. The air is thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, coal smoke, and the ever-present stench from the open sewer that runs along your street. You're not lying on Egyptian cotton. You're on a pile of rags on the floor. If you're lucky, you have a thin, straw-filled mattress that you share with at least 2 siblings. The single small window near the ceiling is crusted with dirt, but it hardly matters. The view is just the feet of people walking by on the street above. There's no servant to wake you gently. Instead, it's your mother's harsh voice. Up now, or there'll be no work. No work means no money. No money means no food. It's that simple. You roll off your makeshift bed, your body already aching. You're 10 years old, but you look 7 due to malnutrition. Your job as a chimney sweep means you need to be small, though. Fat children can't squeeze up the narrow chimney flue. Unlike your wealthy counterpart across town, your morning ablutions are brief. There's a cracked basin with yesterday's water, which you share with your siblings. You splash your face, not that it matters. You'll be covered in soot within hours. Breakfast, a chunk of bread if you're lucky. Maybe a bit of dripping congealed fat to spread on it if times are good. Tea so weak you can see through it. Already made by your mother, who's been up since 4 a.m. preparing to go to her job as a washerwoman. Hurry now, she says, handing you the bread. Her hands are red and raw from lye soap and hot water. At 35, she looks 60. Her body broken by poverty and labor. Mr. Jenkins won't wait, and there's others who want your position. Mr. Jenkins, not the valet from our other story, but the chimney sweep master who essentially owns you for the next 7 years through your apprenticeship. You were sold to him when you were 7 because your family couldn't feed you. He's supposed to teach you a trade, house you, and feed you. In reality, he works you nearly to death, beats you regularly, and feeds you just enough to keep you alive. You pull on your only set of clothes, the same ones you wore yesterday and the day before. They're stiff with dirt and soot. No fancy outfit changes for you. These clothes will stay on until they literally fall apart, at which point they'll be roughly mended and put back on. Your mother looks you over and sigh. Try to come back with something today, she says. What she means is try to steal something from the houses where you clean chimneys. A silver spoon, a handkerchief, anything that can be sold or pawned. It's dangerous. You could be transported to Australia or even hanged for theft. But hunger is a powerful motivator. You nod and slip out into the London dawn. The streets are already busy with workers, men and women heading to factories, street vendors setting up their carts, night soil men who collect human waste, finishing their disgusting rounds. The air is thick with coal smoke, creating the infamous London fog that's actually more like smog. It clings to your skin and clothes, gets in your lungs, burns your eyes, but it's just part of life. You barely notice it anymore. You weave through the narrow streets toward Mr. Jenkins' shop. 7 Dials is a maze of tenements and shops, the buildings leaning toward each other as if conspiring. In some places, you can stretch out your arms and touch buildings on both sides of the alley. The streets are filthy, garbage, animal waste, human waste in some cases. The sewage system is primitive at best, non-existent at worst. Disease is a constant companion in neighborhoods like yours. Cholera, typhoid, tuberculosis. They claim lives every day, especially children's lives. You've already lost 3 siblings, which actually makes your family fortunate compared to many. You arrive at Mr. Jenkins's shop just as he's unlocking the door. He's a massive man with hands like hams and breath that reeks of gin, even this early in the morning. You're late, he growls, cuffing you on the ear hard enough to make you see stars. You're not late. You're actually early on, but arguing would just earn you another blow. Inside, the other sweeps are gathering. All boys, all small, all with the same hollow-eyed look of constant hunger and fear. The youngest is 5, a tiny slip of a boy who still cries for his mother sometimes. The oldest is 14, but small for his age. Once boys get too big for the chimneys, they're turned out with no skills except climbing. Many become pickpockets or worse. Right then, Mr. Jenkins says, gathering his tools, brushes, scraping tools, bags to collect the soot. Soot is valuable. It can be sold for fertilizer or to make black pigment. That's part of how Mr. Jenkins makes his money on top of what he charges for your services. Parker, you take the new boy to Lady Morrison's place on Wimpole Street. Do all the kitchen chimneys and the main parlour, and mind you do it right. Lady Morrison complained last time. Parker, the 14-year-old, nods grimly. Lady Morrison's chimneys are narrow and run hot. It's dangerous work, but all chimney sweeping is dangerous. Boys get stuck and suffocate. They fall. Their lungs are destroyed by soot, leading to the painful death known as chimney sweep's cancer. And yet, as awful as chimney sweeping is, you're actually considered fortunate compared to some children. Factory work can be even more dangerous. Children losing limbs in machinery or slowly being poisoned in match factories. Mine work means days spent in complete darkness, breathing coal dust, crawling through tunnels too small for adults. As you follow Parker through the awakening streets of London, your path takes you briefly through a wealthier area, and there you spot him, the gentleman from our other story, stepping into his carriage for his morning ride. For a brief moment, your eyes meet. He looks away first, uncomfortable with your gaze. To him, you're barely human, a necessary bit of the urban machinery that keeps his world running smoothly. You're both breathing the same London air, walking the same London streets, but you might as well be living on different planets. Parker nudges you, breaking the moment. Come on then, he says. Them chimneys won't sweep themselves. And so your workday begins, climbing up into hot, narrow, soot-filled spaces where you could easily die. Also, the wealthy can have clean, efficient fires to keep their many rooms warm. That's Victorian England for you. A place of staggering inequality, where a few streets can separate unimaginable luxury from desperate squalor, where some children are raised to rule empires, while others are worked to death before they reach adulthood. Back in the wealthy home, breakfast is concluding. You, the wealthy you, have business to attend to. As a gentleman, you don't actually work in the common sense. You manage your estates, make investment decisions, and perhaps hold a seat in Parliament or serve as a magistrate. These are all considered appropriate occupations for a man of your station. Today, you'll be meeting with your solicitor about some property investments, then your club for lunch, then perhaps a ride in the park if the weather holds. Your wife has her own schedule, charity committee meetings, visits to less fortunate relatives who are still quite comfortable by normal standards, perhaps some shopping or social calls. Don't forget we have the Hendersons for tea before the Hartingtons' dinner, your wife reminds you as you prepare to leave. Social obligations are constant and cannot be ignored without consequences. Of course, my dear, I'll be back by 4, you reply, kissing her gloved hand. A proper display of affection for a Victorian gentleman. Your butler hands you your hat, gloves, and walking stick as you exit through the front door. Your carriage awaits, the horses groomed to perfection, the coachman in livery. As you settle into the leather seat, you glance out the window and see a chimney sweep, a small, ragged boy covered in soot. For a moment, your eyes meet an uncomfortable stirs in your chest. Then the carriage moves forward and the moment passes. The two Londons continue their parallel existence, one of privilege, comfort, and excess, the other of deprivation, struggle, and bare survival. And most days, neither truly sees the other. I don't know about you, but when I think about Victorian England, I find myself wondering which world I would have been born into. The odds, say the poorer one. The vast majority of people lived lives of hardship. The fancy balls and fine country homes we see in period dramas, those were for the tiniest sliver of society. I mean, imagine getting up in the morning and having someone else dress you. Actually, don't try to picture that too clearly. It's weird, right? Like, there's a grown man whose entire job is to put your pants on for you. That's got to be awkward the first few dozen times. But then again, imagine being that little chimney sweep, climbing up into spaces so narrow your shoulders get stuck sometimes. Breathing in that soot day after day, knowing that most boys in your position don't make it to adulthood. Suddenly, having someone put your pants on doesn't seem so bad. That's the thing about history. It's easy to romanticize the past when you're only looking at one slice of it. The truth is always more complicated, more uncomfortable. As the day progresses in both worlds, the contrasts only become more stark. The wealthy family's day unfolds with leisure and comfort. Meetings conducted in well-appointed offices, lunch at exclusive clubs, perhaps some shopping at fine establishments where shopkeepers bow and scrape. Every need is anticipated and met, often before they're even aware of the need themselves. Meanwhile, the chimney sweep's day is a brutal marathon of physical suffering. Climbing, scraping, choking on soot, burns from hot flue, cuts from broken bricks. The constant fear of getting stuck, all for a few pennies that will mostly go to the master sweep, with perhaps a crust of bread as your midday meal. And the worst part, this system seemed perfectly natural to the Victorians. The idea that society was divided into distinct classes with different rights and expectations was taken for granted. The rich genuinely believed they deserved their comfort, that it was the natural order of things, and many of the poor accepted their lot as inevitable, focusing on day-to-day survival rather than questioning why their children were dying while others thrived. It would take decades of reform movements, labor organizing, and social awakening to begin addressing these inequalities. The seeds were being planted during the Victorian era, but the harvest would come much later. As night falls across London, both our characters prepare for sleep. One in a soft, clean bed with fresh sheets and a full stomach. The other on a pile of rags. Body aching, stomach growling, same city, same time. Different worlds, and as you lie in your comfortable modern bed, perhaps give a thought to which world you might have inhabited had you been born in Victorian London. The odds are you'd have been much closer to our little chimney sweep than to the gentleman in his townhouse. Something to be grateful for as you drift off to sleep. But for now, we'll leave both our Victorian Londoners to their rest and continue their story tomorrow. The contrast between their lives will only become more apparent as we follow them through work, leisure, education, and more. Victorian England was a society of stark divisions, where your birth determined your destiny in ways we can barely comprehend today. Asterisk in your cozy bed, with your full stomach and access to modern medicine. You're already living a life that even the wealthiest Victorian would envy in some ways. Keep that thought close as you drift off to sleep, surrounded by comforts that would seem magical to people just a few generations ago. The morning light streams through the ornate windows of your study, casting long rectangles across the Turkish carpet. It's 10 a.m. and you've been working for nearly an hour now. I put working in quotes because what constitutes work for a wealthy Victorian gentleman would barely qualify as effort to most people. You sit at a massive mahogany desk reviewing accounts from your country estates. The numbers are presented in perfect columns by your land agent, who actually does the real work of managing your property. Your job is essentially to read his reports and make occasional decisions about investments or improvements. Your butler enters after a discreet knock. "Mr. Harrington has arrived, sir." You look up from your papers. "Ah, yes." "Show him in. Mr. Harrington is your solicitor." Essentially your lawyer and financial advisor rolled into one. He's middle class, educated at a good but not great school, and makes a comfortable living managing legal affairs for gentlemen like yourself. He enters with a deferential nod, clutching a leather portfolio. "Good morning, my lord. I trust I find you well." "Quite well, Harrington. What news on the Manchester property?" Mr. Harrington takes a seat across from you and opens his portfolio. "Most promising, sir. The factory is now fully operational, and the first quarter's profits exceed our projections by nearly 15%. What he doesn't mention, and what you don't ask about, are the conditions inside that factory. The 14-hour workdays, the child laborers, the dangerous machinery with no safety features, the pitiful wages. That's not your concern. Your concern is the 15% above projections." "Excellent," you say, allowing yourself a small smile. "And the railway shares also performing admirably. The new line to Bristol has increased in value by 20% since your initial investment. And so it goes, a catalogue of your money making more money, all without you having to do anything resembling actual labour. This is the Victorian gentleman's ideal to live off investments, property, and inherited wealth. To dirty one's hands with trade or manufacturing is considered vulgar, though many aristocrats secretly invest in such enterprises through intermediaries like Mr. Harrington. You're not a totally useless person, though. You serve as a magistrate in your country district, sitting in judgment over poachers and petty thieves. You hold a seat in Parliament, though you rarely attend except for important votes. You're a patron of several charities, donating money, and occasionally attending fundraising events. You consider these activities your contribution to society, your noblesse oblige. The meeting with Mr. Harrington concludes after about an hour. You've made decisions involving thousands of pounds, more money than a factory worker would see in a lifetime, with nothing more strenuous than a few signatures and nods. Will that be all?" "Sir," your butler asks as Mr. Harrington departs. "Yes, thank you, Wilson. I believe I'll head to my club for lunch. Your workday is effectively over before noon. Time for leisure. Meanwhile, across London, our chimney sweep is in the middle of his third chimney of the day. The flue is narrow and twisting, barely wider than his shoulders. The brick is rough against his skin, scraping him raw in places. Soot fills his eyes and mouth despite the handkerchief tied over his face. The heat is intense. This chimney was used just yesterday, and the bricks still hold warmth. Move faster, boy. The shout echoes up from below where the master's sweep waits impatiently. We've got 4 more houses after this one. The boy, let's call him Tom, doesn't waste breath responding. He needs every ounce of energy to keep moving upward, using his elbows and knees to brace against the sides of the flue. His small brush scrapes at the soot, sending it cascading down into the fireplace below. This is dangerous work. Just last month, a boy from a neighbouring sweep business got stuck in a chimney. By the time they broke through the wall to reach him, he had suffocated. It happens more often than anyone acknowledges. Tom finally reaches the top, his head poking out into blessed fresh air for a moment. London spreads out below him, a forest of chimneys and rooftops shrouded in cold smoke. For a brief instant, he feels something like freedom perched above the city that otherwise crushes him, but there's no time to enjoy the view. He needs to make his way back down, which is often more dangerous than going up. One slip and he could fall the entire height of the chimney. When he finally emerges into the kitchen fireplace, he's covered head to toe in black soot. Only the whites of his eyes and the pink of his tongue show through when he coughs. Took you long enough. The master's sweep grumbles. Clean yourself up enough not to track soot. Then on to the next one. The kitchen maid gives him a sympathetic look and hands him a cup of water and a chunk of bread. When the master's back is turned, it's a small kindness, but in Tom's world, small kindnesses are everything. Thank you, miss, he whispers, gulping down the water and stuffing the bread into his pocket for later. You're welcome, little man, she says. My brother was a sweep before he got too big. I know how it is. Tom nods gratefully. There's a camaraderie among the working poor, a recognition of shared struggle that creates moments of connection amid the hardship. As Tom follows his master out onto the street, they pass a gentleman stepping into a handsome carriage. It's you, the wealthy you, heading to your club for lunch. Your eyes slide past Tom without really seeing him. Just another smudge in the urban landscape. You arrive at your club, an exclusive establishment on Pall Mall, where membership is strictly controlled. No trade allowed, only gentlemen of proper breeding and connections. The doorman greets you by name, taking your hat and gloves. Inside, it's like a palace dedicated to masculine comfort. Deep leather chairs, polished wood, the smell of good tobacco and brandy. The dining room gleams with crystal and silver. You join several acquaintances for lunch, and the conversation flows between politics, business, and the upcoming social season. I hear Lady Elizabeth will be at the Hartingtons tonight, mentions Lord Pembroke, a ruddy-faced peer with whom you share some railway investments. So, I'm told, you reply nen-calm, mitty. Fine family, the Westmorlands, bloodlines as old as any in England. He gives you a knowing look, and the girl's dowry is said to be substantial. You offer a tight smile. Your personal finances are excellent, but no gentleman would turn down a substantial dowry. Marriage in your circle is as much a business transaction as an emotional union. Lunch is 5 courses. Soup, fish, meat, dessert, and cheese, accompanied by fine wines. The food is exquisite, prepared by a French chef who commands a salary higher than most government officials. You eat until pleasantly full, then retire to the smoking room for brandy and cigars. This is the work of a wealthy Victorian man. Meetings, meals, social connections. The real labor that generates your wealth happens far away, performed by people you'll never meet. Tom's lunch is the chunk of bread from the kitchen maid, eaten hastily between chimneys. It's barely enough to keep him going, but he's used to hunger. His master doesn't stop for a proper meal. Time is money, and there are chimneys to sweep. By mid-afternoon, Tom has cleaned 5 chimneys. His body aches, his lungs burn, and he's covered in cuts and bruises. But the day isn't over. There's one more house, this one with a particularly difficult chimney that twists at an odd angle. You'll need the brush with the long handle for this one, his master tells him, handing him the tool. And be quick about it. Lady Harrington is hosting a dinner tonight, and she wants her drawing room fire perfect. The name catches my attention. Lady Harrington, your wife. Tom is about to clean the chimney in your London home. He enters through the servants' entrance, careful to keep his feet on the cloth path laid down by the housemaids specifically for this purpose. The house is a flurry of activity preparing for the evening's dinner party. Footmen polish silver maids, dust ornaments. The cook shouts orders in the kitchen. Tom is led to the main drawing room, a space larger than his entire tenement building. Crystal chandeliers hang from a ceiling painted with classical scenes. Silk wallpaper, gilded mirrors, and furniture that costs more than Tom's master will earn in his lifetime. And there she is, your wife, Lady Harrington, directing the placement of flower arrangements. She glances at Tom with a mixture of distaste and resignation. Chimney sweeps are a necessary evil, bringing filth into her immaculate home. Be sure he doesn't soil anything, she instructs the housekeeper, and have the maids dust again once he's finished. Tom is invisible, talked about as if he can't hear or understand. This is normal for him. The wealthy rarely address servants directly, and chimney sweeps are lower than servants. He sets to work on the drawing room chimney, aware that every eye is watching for mistakes. This chimney is particularly challenging. It hasn't been cleaned in months, and the flue narrows severely about halfway up. I need to pause here and talk about something many people don't know about Victorian chimney sweeps. See, chimneys get clogged with a substance called creosote, which is basically hardened tar from wood and coal smoke. It builds up inside chimneys and can catch fire if not removed regularly. When a chimney is really clogged, sweeps would sometimes resort to a horrifying practice. They'd send a boy up, and then they'd light a small fire below. The heat and smoke would drive the boy upward, forcing him to climb faster while scraping away the creosote. Children would get burned, suffocate, or fall trying to escape the heat and smoke. It was technically illegal by the 1840s, but it still happened, especially with difficult chimneys like the one Tom is facing. This one's proper stuck up, Tom's master mutters, examining the chimney. He glances around to make sure no household staff are nearby. Might need a bit of encouragement. Tom's heart sinks. He knows what that means. Please, sir, he whispers. I can do it proper without... Just need a bit more time. The master sweep considers, then nods curtly. 5 minutes, then we do it my way. Tom attacks the chimney with desperate energy, scraping and brushing, pushing his small body into spaces that would terrify most adults. He ignores the cuts from rough brick, the choking soot, the dizziness from poor air. Anything is better than encouragement. When he emerges 15 minutes later, he's managed to clear the worst of the blockage. His master examines the work with a critical eye, then gives a grudging nod of approval. It'll do, get your things. We're finished for today. Tom gathers the brushes and soot bags with shaking hands. The close call has left him drained. As they leave through the servants' entrance, the cook, seeing his exhaustion, secretly hands him a meat pie wrapped in cloth for later. She whispers, "You look half-starved, child. It's another small kindness in a world that offers few." Tom clutches the pie-like treasure, already imagining sharing it with his siblings later. As they exit onto the street, they pass you, returning home to dress for dinner. You notice the chimney sweep leaving your house, but think nothing of it. Just another service performed by the invisible hands that keep your world running smoothly. This is the reality of work in Victorian England. Some direct and supervise, others labour until their bodies break. Some earn in a minute what others won't see in a lifetime, and most accept this arrangement as natural, even divinely ordained. Now, let's shift gears and look at women's work in both worlds. Your wife doesn't work in the traditional sense. Her job is to manage the household, supervise the servants, maintain social connections, and represent the family status through her appearance and conduct. It's not easy. Victorian high society has countless unwritten rules, and one misstep can damage a family's reputation. Today, after directing the preparations for tonight's dinner, she has correspondence to attend to. Seated at her writing desk, a delicate rosewood piece that costs more than a labourer's annual wage. She replies to invitations, writes thank you notes, and sends instructions to tradespeople. Her lady's maid stands nearby, ready to assist with any need. The relationship between a lady and her maid is often the closest one in her life, more intimate in many ways than her relationship with her husband. The maid knows all her secrets, helps her dress and undress, styles her hair, and often serves as a confidant. Jenkins says Lord James will be at the Hartingtons tonight. Your wife mentions to her maid as she seals a letter with wax. Indeed, my lady, the maid, keeps her expression neutral, but there's a hint of interest in her voice. She knows her mistress finds Lord James amusing company. Yes, he's just returned from India, apparently. Should have some interesting stories. She selects another sheet of monogrammed stationery. The blue dress tonight, I think, with the pearls. An excellent choice, my lady. This is women's work in wealthy Victorian households, managing social connections, maintaining appearances, supervising servants. It's constrained and often tedious, but it comes with enormous privilege. Contrast this with the work of poor women like Tom's mother. She's been at the washing house since dawn, standing in steaming water mixed with harsh lye soap, scrubbing other people's linens until her hands bleed. The washing house is deafening, dozens of women pounding clothes, wringing them through mangles, shouting to be heard over the den. Her back aches from bending over the washtub. Her hands are raw and cracked, and the steam has made her hair hang in damp strings around her face. She looks 20 years older than she is. For this brutal labour, she earns a few shillings, barely enough to feed her children. And she's actually fortunate. Compared to many women, at least washing is considered respectable work. Many poor women resort to prostitution when they can't earn enough from factory work or domestic service. The Victorian era's notorious double standard is on full display in attitudes toward women's work. Middle and upper class women are expected to remain in separate spheres from men. The home is their domain and paid work would be shameful. Yet working class women must labor alongside men in factories, fields, and workshops, often while also bearing full responsibility for home and children. By late afternoon, both our characters are finishing their workday. You return home to dress for dinner, assisted by Jenkins, who has laid out your evening clothes. Black tailcoat, white waistcoat, starched shirt, and black trousers. Dressing for a formal dinner is a ritual that takes nearly an hour. The new cologne from Paris has arrived, Sir Jenkins mentions as he helps you into your shirt. Would you care to try it this evening? Yes, why not? You barely think about the cost of such luxuries. The cologne probably cost more than Tom's family pays in rent for a month. Downstairs, the house is transformed for evening. Chandeliers blaze with dozens of candles. Silver gleams on the dining table, set for 12 fresh flowers, perfumed the air. The staff moves with practiced precision, putting final touches on the dinner preparations. Your wife appears resplendent in blue silk, with pearls at her throat and wrists. Her waist, compressed by a tightly laced corset, looks impossibly small. Her hair is elaborately arranged, small diamond pins catching the light. You look beautiful, my dear, you say, and mean it. Whatever the practical nature of your marriage, you can appreciate her beauty and the effort she makes to maintain appearances. Thank you, Charles. She adjusts your cravat slightly. The carriage is ready whenever you are. Meanwhile, Tom has finally reached home. The basement room in 7 Dials. His siblings rush to greet him, their eyes lighting up when he produces the meat pie given to him by your cook. Look what I got, he announces proudly. His mother smiles tiredly from where she sits by the small fire, her hands raw from the day's washing. Bless you, child, she says as she takes the pie and carefully cuts it into pieces. One for each family member, even divided among 5 people. It's a feast compared to their usual fare. As they eat, Tom recounts his day, the difficult chimneys, the brief view from the rooftops, the kind kitchen maid. He omits the scarier moments. His mother has enough to worry about. His younger sister, Mary, aged 8, shows him what she's learned at the Sunday school she attends. She can write her name now and recognize a few words. Education is their only hope for a better future, though the chances of getting enough schooling to make a difference are slim. After their meager meal, Tom's mother reads aloud from a tattered Bible, one of the few books in their possession. Despite their hardships, there's love in this room and moments of joy amid the struggle. They make the best of what they have, finding small pleasures where they can. But as they settle down to sleep, all 5 of them in one room, the contrast with your evening couldn't be more stark. You and your wife arrive at the Hartingtons' mansion in Mayfair, your carriage joining a line of similar vehicles, disking finely dressed guests. Footmen in livery assist you from the carriage, and you enter a home even grander than your own. The evening ahead will include multiple courses of fine food, excellent wine, music, conversation, and social maneuvering. You'll discuss politics, investments, and gossip about absent friends. You'll observe who's rising and falling in society's estimation. You might even further your acquaintance with Lady Elizabeth or her cousin, Lord James. 2 worlds separated by just a few miles of London streets. 2 completely different experiences of work and reward, and neither fully sees or understands the other. I think about this divide sometimes when I'm stuck in traffic or waiting in a long line. I get annoyed, impatient. Then I remember Tom up in that chimney or his mother standing in lye water for 14 hours. My hardships suddenly seem pretty trivial. Victorian England wasn't that long ago, just a few generations. Many of the social structures they created still influence our world today. The extreme inequality has diminished in some ways, increased in others. But the fundamental question remains, how do we value different kinds of work, and why do we accept such vast differences in reward? Something to ponder as you drift closer to sleep. In our next chapter, we'll explore how education differed between these 2 worlds and how it shaped the future possibilities for both rich and poor. Children in Victorian England. The next morning dawns in both households, yours in Belgravia and Tom's in 7 Dials. The contrast in how the children of these 2 worlds spend their days is just as stark as everything else we've seen. In your wealthy home, your son William, let's say he's 12, wakes to the sound of his valet drawing the curtains. Yes, even children of the wealthy have their own servants in Victorian England. The boy yawns and stretches in his 4-poster bed, his room nearly as large as Tom's entire home. "Good morning, Master William," says the valet, a young man named Peters, who serves as a combination of servant and companion to your son. "Mr. Crawford will be here at 9 for your Latin lesson." William groans. Latin again. It's so boring. Now, Master William, Peter says as he lays out the boy's clothes. Your father says a proper education is the foundation of a gentleman's life. And what constitutes a proper education for a boy of William's class? A curriculum focused on classical studies, Latin, Greek, mathematics, history, and literature. Not because these subjects have practical applications, but because they mark one as cultured and well-bred. The goal isn't to prepare William for a profession. Gentlemen don't have professions, but to prepare him for university. Probably Oxford or Cambridge, where he'll make connections with other young men of his class. For now, William is educated at home by a series of tutors who visit daily. Each is a specialist in his field, often a clergyman or university graduate who hasn't quite succeeded enough to secure a more prestigious position. They're paid well by your standards, but are firmly middle class, occupying an awkward position between servant and equal in your household. After a breakfast served in the nursery by a maid, eggs, toast, ham, and hot chocolate, William settles into the schoolroom for his first lesson of the day. The schoolroom is a dedicated space filled with maps, globes, books, and scientific instruments. One wall holds a massive bookshelf filled with educational texts and approved literature. Mr. Crawford arrives precisely at 9, a thin man in his 40s with spectacles and ink-stained fingers. He carries a worn leather satchel containing textbooks and papers. Good morning, Master William, he says formally. I trust you've completed your translation of Cicero. William produces several sheets of paper covered in a neat, if reluctant hand. The translation is mediocre. William finds Latin tedious, but Mr. Crawford won't criticize too harshly. The son of a wealthy family can't be treated like a common schoolboy, no matter how lazy his scholarship. Yes, Mr. Crawford says, scanning the work. Some errors here and here, but the general sense is correct. Now, let us move on to today's passage. And so begins for hours of education before lunch, followed by 3 more after. William will study mathematics with another tutor in the afternoon, then perhaps have a fencing or riding lesson if the weather permits. Physical education is considered important for boys of his class, not just for health, but to develop the bearing and skills expected of a gentleman. This education is expensive. Each tutor charges several guineas per week, but it's considered an essential investment in maintaining the family's social position. William isn't being prepared to earn a living. He's being prepared to manage the family estates and investments he'll eventually inherit, and to take his place in high society. Now, let's switch to Tom's morning. There's no valet, no private schoolroom, no tutors. Tom is already at work. We've established he's a chimney sweep. His education, such as it is, happens in stolen moments. His younger sister, Mary, though, might give us a better window into poor children's education at 8. She's still too young for full-time work, though she helps her mother with washing and minding the baby. 3 mornings a week, she attends a ragged school, a Charitarian institution for the poorest children. The ragged school is a single room above a stable filled with 60 children of various ages. They sit on benches at rough wooden tables, the smallest children at the front, the older ones at the back. There's one teacher, Miss Perkins, a spinster in her 30s, who sees this work as Christian charity. The conditions would horrify modern educators. The room is cold in winter, stifling in summer. There are few books. The children share tattered readers and slates for writing. Many come to school hungry, dirty, and exhausted from helping with family, work before and after school. Mary arrives just as Miss Perkins is ringing the bell to start the day. She's wearing her only dress, patched in several places, but clean. Her mother insists on cleanliness, seeing it as a bulwark against complete degradation. "Good morning, children," Miss Perkins says over the shuffling and whispering of 60 restless pupils. "Good morning, Miss Perkins." They chorus in ragged unison. The school day begins with a Bible reading and prayers. Religious instruction is central to poor children's education, partly because many ragged schools are funded by church groups, but also because Victorian reformers believed moral improvement was more important for the poor than academic achievement. After prayers, the children are divided by ability rather than age. Mary joins a group learning basic reading. She's bright and eager to learn, but her attendance is irregular. When her mother needs help or there's paying work she can do, education takes second place to survival. Miss Perkins moves between groups, setting work for each before moving on. The older children often help teach the younger ones, using the monitorial system common in poor schools of the era. "Mary, can you read this passage for us?" Miss Perkins asks, pointing to a paragraph in the tattered reader they're sharing. Mary concentrates, sounding out the words carefully. The good child obeys his parents and is kind to all. She beams with pride at having read the sentence without help. "Very good, Mary," Miss Perkins says with a smile. "Now, who can tell me what obeys means?" This is education reduced to its most basic elements: literacy, numeracy, religious instruction, and moral lessons about knowing one's place. There's no Latin, no higher mathematics, no literature beyond simple moral tales. The goal is not to elevate poor children out of their class, but to make them better, more moral members of it. Mary loves school despite its limitations. The hours spent learning are a respite from household chores and the grinding reality of poverty. She treasures the knowledge she gains, seeing it rightly as a possible path to something better. Miss Perkins says, "I read better than anyone in my group," she tells her mother proudly when she returns home at midday. Her mother smiles tiredly as she rings out washing in their single room. "That's wonderful, love. Perhaps you'll be a shopgirl someday with reading like that." This is the height of educational ambition for most poor families. Not university or professions, but perhaps a slightly better class of work than their parents had. A shopgirl instead of a washerwoman, a clerk instead of a factory worker. You know what's truly crazy to me about Victorian education? The absolute certainty they had about what different classes of people needed to learn. There was no concept that a poor child might have the same intellectual capacity or potential as a rich one. Education was designed to reinforce class boundaries, not overcome them. Wait, let me give you a specific example that really drives this home. In 1862, there was this education reform called the Revised Code that introduced what they called payment by results. Schools for poor children received government funding based on their students' performance in yearly examinations in reading, writing, and arithmetic. Sounds reasonable, right? But here's the kicker. The standards were incredibly basic. By age 11, children were only expected to read a short paragraph from a newspaper, write from dictation, and do simple arithmetic. That was considered sufficient education for working-class children. Meanwhile, wealthy children the same age were studying Latin, Greek, algebra, and classic literature. The system wasn't designed to identify talented poor children and help them advance. It was designed to give poor children just enough education to be useful workers while ensuring they didn't develop aspirations above their station. Back in your wealthy household, William's education continues with his mathematics tutor, Mr. Baxter. Unlike Mr. Crawford, who treats Latin as an intellectual exercise, Mr. Baxter tries to relate mathematics to practical concerns. Now, Master William, let us say you inherit an estate that yields $5,000 per annum, but carries mortgages requiring payments of Hong $200 per annum. If you wish to maintain a London residence costing $800 per annum and support a family at $1,500 per annum, how much remains for investments and improvements? William calculates quickly. $1,500, sir. Correct. And if those investments yield 5% annually, how much additional income will you have after 1 year? 75, sir. Very good. You see, mathematics has practical applications for a gentleman managing his affairs. This is as close as William's education comes to vocational training, learning to manage the wealth he'll inherit. He won't be taught a trade or profession that would be beneath his station. If he weren't the eldest son, who will inherit the bulk of the family fortune, he might be prepared for the church, the military, or perhaps the diplomatic service, acceptable occupations for younger sons of good families. William's sister, Emma, receives a different education entirely. At 14, she studies with a governess rather than tutors. Her curriculum includes French, music, drawing, needlework, and enough history and literature to make her an entertaining conversationalist. The goal is to prepare her for marriage, not intellectual achievement. Miss Harrington, the governess, watches as Emma practices the piano in the drawing room. Your wrist position is still not quite right, Miss Emma. Remember, a lady's accomplishments reflect on her breeding. Emma adjusts her wrists, suppressing a sigh. She actually enjoys reading and has a quick mind, but her education is designed to make her decorative rather than knowledgeable. Deep learning in women is considered unfeminine and possibly dangerous. Medical authorities warn it might divert energy from the reproductive organs to the brain, rendering women infertile or prone to hysteria. Will I need to play at Lady Hartington's dinner next week? Emma asks, hoping the answer is no. She finds performing for company. Your mother thinks it would be appropriate for you to play one piece, Miss Harrington replies. Lord James will be there, and he's known to appreciate music. Emma blushes slightly. At 14, she's already being subtly prepared for the marriage market, though her formal debut is still a few years away. Her education, her accomplishments, even her carefully supervised social interactions, are all designed with one goal in mind: securing an advantageous match. Meanwhile, Mary's education at the Ragged School continues with an arithmetic lesson. The children work on slates, practicing simple sums. The practical focus is evident. They learn to calculate wages, measure cloth, and make change. These are the mathematical skills needed for working-class life. Please, Miss Mary raises her hand. When will we learn proper writing? My brother says he could get better work if he could write letters. Miss Perkins looks sympathetic but realistic. We'll begin copper plate next month for those who've mastered their sums. Mary, but remember, for most positions, reading is more important than writing. This is another stark difference in educational goals. Poor children are taught to read instructions, signs, and simple texts, skills needed for manual and service work. Writing is considered less essential as most jobs available to them require following orders, not giving them. By early afternoon, Mary's school day ends. The Ragged School operates on a half-day schedule, assuming poor children need the remaining hours to contribute to family survival. Mary returns home to help her mother finish the washing, her mind still working on the day's lessons. "Mama, Miss Perkins says I might get a scholarship to the charity school if I keep learning well," she says as she folds clean linens. Her mother looks up, conflicted. A charity school would mean more education, perhaps even until age 12 or 13. But it would also mean years without Mary's contribution to the family income. "We'll see, love," she says, not wanting to discourage her daughter's hopes while remaining practical about their circumstances. "It would be a fine thing, but we need every penny with the baby coming." Mary nods, understanding the unspoken reality. Education is a luxury when survival is at stake. Back in Belgravia, William's educational day is winding down with his final tutor, Mr. Thompson, who teaches history and geography. Today's lesson focuses on the British Empire, that vast pink expanse covering nearly a quarter of the globe on the schoolroom map. The empire, Master William, is Britain's greatest achievement, Mr. Thompson explains, pointing to territories from Canada to Australia, India to Africa. "We bring civilization, Christianity, and commerce to primitive peoples. It is the burden of the British gentleman to govern these territories wisely. This is education as imperial indoctrination, preparing William for his place in a ruling class that governs not just Britain, but a significant portion of the world's population. There's no questioning of Britain's right to these territories, no examination of the exploitation that underlies the imperial project. William is being taught that rule is his birthright, both at home and abroad. After his lessons conclude, William has free time before dinner. He heads to the garden where Peter has set up his new cricket set, a birthday gift. Physical education through sports is considered essential for boys of his class, teaching teamwork, leadership, and the concept of fair play that underpins the gentleman's code of conduct. As William practices his bowling technique, his father returns from his club and pauses to watch. These moments of paternal attention are rare and precious in wealthy Victorian families, where fathers are often distant figures. "Good form, William," you say briefly, resting a hand on your son's shoulder. "Crawford tells me your Latin is improving." William stands a little straighter. "Yes, father. I've been practicing the declinians you showed me." "Excellent. Perhaps you'll be ready for Harrow next year, then." This casual mention of boarding school sends a ripple of anxiety through William. At 13, boys of his class typically leave home for public schools like Eton, Harrow, or Rugby. These institutions are breeding grounds for the empire's future leaders, places where boys learn not just academic subjects, but the unwritten codes of upper-class masculine behavior. The curriculum at these schools remains heavily classical, with an emphasis on Latin, Greek, and mathematics. Conditions are often harsh by modern standards. Cold dormitories, poor food, harsh discipline, and institutionalized bullying. But the social connections formed there will shape the rest of William's life. I'll work hard to be ready, father," William says, hiding his apprehension. You nod, satisfied, and continue into the house. You yourself attended Eton, as did your father and grandfather. It's simply what men of your class do. The possibility that William might not attend or might attend a different type of school never crosses your mind. This certainty about educational paths is common across all classes in Victorian England. Children are prepared for the lives they're expected to lead with little thought given to individual talents or desires. The education system is designed to reproduce the existing social order, not challenge it. And yet, despite these rigid structures, there are always exceptions. Poor children who find paths to education beyond what their birth would predict. Wealthy children who reject the futures laid out for them. These exceptions are rare but significant, proving that human potential can sometimes transcend even the most stratified social systems. As the day ends in both households, the children prepare for sleep with vastly different prospects ahead of them. William will likely go to university, inherit wealth, and take his place among Britain's ruling class. Mary might, with luck and determination, secure slightly better work than her mother. But her horizons are severely limited by both gender and class. Tom, returning exhausted from another day of chimney sweeping, has even fewer prospects. By the time he's too large to climb chimneys, his lungs will be damaged by soot, his body stunted by malnutrition and labor. Without education, his options will be limited to manual work, assuming he survives to adulthood at all. This is the educational landscape of Victorian England, a system designed not to create opportunity, but to prepare each class for its predetermined role. The stark divisions we've seen in housing, food, and work are reinforced and perpetuated through education, ensuring that the children of the rich remain rich, while the children of the poor remain poor. Yet even within these constraints, the human spirit seeks knowledge and growth. Mary treasures her limited schooling, finding joy in learning despite its practical limitations. And while William might take his educational privileges for granted, the knowledge he gains has intrinsic value beyond its social function. In our next chapter, we'll explore how the different classes of Victorian England spent their leisure time, how they played, relaxed, and entertained themselves when work and education were done. Even in their moments of joy and recreation, the divide between rich and poor remained vast. Yet there were surprising overlaps and shared pleasures that crossed class boundaries as you drift closer to sleep. Consider how education has shaped your own life and opportunities. Most of us today have access to learning that even the wealthiest Victorians couldn't imagine. It's a privilege they would have understood well, even if the democratic distribution of that privilege would have shocked them. The weekend arrives in both our Victorian worlds, a concept that means very different things depending on your social class. For the wealthy, weekends are for leisure and social display. For the poor, they might bring a partial reprieve from labor, but rarely a complete one. Let's start with your Saturday as a wealthy Victorian gentleman. You wake later than usual, perhaps 8 a.m. instead of 7, and enjoy a leisurely breakfast with the morning papers. The Times for serious news, perhaps Punch for humor and social commentary. Your butler has ironed the newspapers to remove the ink that might soil your fingers. Just one of countless invisible services performed for your comfort. Will you be riding in the park this morning, sir? Jenkins asks as he helps you dress in casual morning attire, which still involves a jacket, waistcoat, and properly tied cravat. Yes, I think so. Have Thompson ready the bay mare. Horseback riding in Hyde Park, particularly along the fashionable stretch known as Rotten Row, is a social ritual as much as exercise. Between the hours of 10 a.m. and 100 p.m., the park becomes a showcase for the wealthy and well-connected. Ladies and gentlemen display their horsemanship, their fine mounts, and their fashionable riding attire while exchanging greetings and gossip. Your bay mare is a beautiful animal worth more than a working man's annual salary. Her coat gleams from daily grooming by dedicated stable hands. Your riding boots alone cost more than Tom's family spends on food in a month as you trot along the sandy path of Rotten Row. You exchange nods and brief conversations with acquaintances. It's a perfect spring day, the kind that makes even London seem fresh and full of possibility. Harrington, good to see you out. Lord Pembroke pulls his stallion alongside yours. Thought you might be recovering after the Hartingtons' dinner. Went rather late, didn't it? You smile. Not too bad. Left before the worst of it, wise man. I saw Westmoreland carrying his daughter to the carriage at 3 o'clock in the morning. Poor girl was dead on her feet. He gives you a meaningful look. Lady Elizabeth seemed quite taken with you, by the by. This is leisure serving its social purpose. Recreation combined with networking, courtship, and status display. Even your choice of horse and how well you ride it contribute to your social capital. After your ride, you might visit your club for lunch, then perhaps attend a cricket match at Lord's or go to the races if it's the season. Sporting events are important social occasions, opportunities to see and be seen while enjoying the competition. Gambling is a common feature of wealthy leisure. Not the desperate wagering of the poor, but elegant, controlled risk-taking that demonstrates both your wealth and your sporting attitude toward it. You might bet substantial sums on horses or cricket matches, or play cards for high stakes at your club, losing gracefully without visible concern over the amounts marks you as a true gentleman. Let's shift across town to see how Tom and his family spend their Saturday. For Tom, Saturday means a half day of work rather than the usual 14 hours. He still rises before dawn to sweep chimneys, but finishes around 200 p.m. This half day is a Victorian reform, intended to provide working people with some leisure time, though many employers find ways around it. Tom returns home with his meagre pay, perhaps 5 shillings for the week, most of which goes directly to his mother for food and rent. But he's kept back a penny, a rare extravagance, for Saturday's entertainment. Can I go to the penny gaff with Eddie? He asks his mother, referring to a cheap neighborhood theater that offers variety shows. His mother hesitates. Penny gaffs have dubious reputations. They're often rowdy and sometimes feature content that's hardly appropriate for children. But Tom works hard all week, and childhood pleasures are few in his world. Just an hour, mind, she says finally, and straight back after. Tom grins and dashes out to find his friend, another sweet boy who lives 3 doors down. Together, they head for the penny gaff, a converted shop where wooden benches face a small, raised stage. For their penny admission, they'll see a mixed program of songs, dances, comic sketches, and perhaps a melodrama with exaggerated villains and heroes. The audience is primarily working gas, factory workers, servants on their half-day off, street vendors, and laborers. The atmosphere is raucous with audience members calling out to performers, singing along with familiar songs, and freely expressing approval or disapproval. Look, they've got Funny Joe tonight. Eddie points excitedly to a crude poster advertising a popular comedian. My brother says he does this bit with a live pig that'll make you wet yourself laughing. The boys find seats on a bench near the back, their small size making it hard to see over the adults in front. The air is thick with tobacco smoke, beer fumes, and the smell of unwashed bodies. Not that Tom notices, being perpetually covered in chimney soot himself. The show begins with a singer, a woman in Tory finery, performing music hall ballads with suggestive lyrics that go over Tom's head but elicit knowing laughter from the adults. Then comes a man who juggles knives, a girl who dances on a ball, and finally Funny Joe himself with his trained pig. The performance is crude by upper caste standards, but it provides genuine belly laughs and a few moments of wonder for Tom. This is entertainment that speaks directly to working-class experiences and humor, without the pretensions or moral instructiveness of improving entertainment offered by middle-class reformers. When the show ends, Tom and Eddie spill out onto the street with the rest of the audience, still laughing about Funny Joe's antics. "Core, that was worth a penny and then some," Eddie declares. "What'll you do with the rest of your half-day then?" Tom shrugs. "Help Mum with the washing." "Probably you. Dad's taking us to the dogfights behind the Bull and Crown. Want to come?" Tom shakes his head. "Can't. Promised Mum I'd be right back." Animal sports, dogfights, rat baiting, cockfighting are popular working-class entertainments. Despite being technically illegal, they offer excitement, social gathering, and the opportunity to gamble small sums that might multiply into meaningful amounts. But Tom's mother disapproves, believing such spectacles brutalize those who watch them. Instead, Tom returns home to help with household chores. Leisure for poor children is often limited and interspersed with work. Even play frequently mimics adult labor. Girls play at keeping house, boys at trades they might enter. Still, there are moments of genuine childhood joy. After helping with the washing, Tom joins a group of neighborhood children in a street game of King of the Castle, using a pile of construction rubble as their fortress. The game is physical, competitive, and offers a rare opportunity for mastery and control in lives largely defined by submission to adult authority. Now, let's return to your evening as a wealthy Victorian. Saturday night might mean a dinner party, a ball, or perhaps the theatre or opera. Tonight, you and your wife are attending a performance at the Royal Opera House, followed by a late supper at Lady Pe. Your evening clothes are even more formal than your day wear. A black tailcoat with satin lapels, white waistcoat, white bow tie, and black trousers with a satin stripe down each leg. Your wife wears an evening gown with a low neckline, her hair elaborately arranged with jeweled pins, long gloves extending above her elbows. Your private carriage delivers you to the opera house where you're shown to your box. These boxes, rented by subscription for the season, are as much about seeing and being seen as about watching the performance. Opera glasses are used as often to observe other audience members as to view the stage. "The Westmorlands are here," your wife murmurs, subtly indicating a box across the theatre where Lady Elizabeth sits with her parents, and there's Lord James with them. You lift your opera glasses for a discreet look. Lady Elizabeth is indeed present, looking quite fetching in pale blue. Lord James sits beside her, handsome and tanned from his time in India. You feel a slight twinge, not jealousy exactly, but awareness that marital arrangements can change quickly in your social circle. The performance is Verdi's La Traviata, sung in Italian. You understand enough to follow along, having received the classical education we discussed earlier. Your wife, educated by governesses rather than tutors, relies more on the printed program and her general familiarity with the story. During the intermission, you promenade in the grand foyer, exchanging greetings with acquaintances. This is another form of social work disguised as leisure, maintaining connections, gathering information, assessing the subtle shifts in status and alliance that define high society. "Ah, Harrington." Lord Weston approaches his daughter and nephew in tow, enjoying the performance indeed, though I think their last Verdi was stronger. Quite. You know my daughter, Lady Elizabeth, of course, and my nephew, Lord James." You bow over Lady Elizabeth's hand. "A pleasure to see you again, Lady Elizabeth. She curtsies, eyes downcast in proper maiden modesty. Lord Harrington, Lord James, shakes your hand with colonial informality. Harrington, good to see you. Your wife looks radiant tonight. There's a subtle dance happening here. Lord Westend, displaying his daughter like fine merchandise. Lord James assessing you as potential competition. Your wife and Lady Elizabeth maintaining proper feminine decorum while communicating volumes through glances and slight gestures. This is leisure as performance, as social negotiation, as business. The actual opera is almost secondary to these complex interactions. After the performance and a late supper at Lady Pembroke's, another opportunity for social display and connection, you and your wife return home well after midnight. Your servants, of course, have waited up regardless of their own fatigue. They help you and your wife undress, prepare you for sleep, and only then seek their own rest. Tom's Saturday evening is considerably different. After his street games, he returns home for a simple supper, perhaps bread and dripping again, or potato soup if they're fortunate. Then the family gathers around their small fire as Tom's father returns from his day's labor as a bricklayer. Despite their poverty, this is a moment of genuine family togetherness. Tom's father, usually taciturn from exhaustion, tells stories about his own childhood in rural Yorkshire. His mother darns socks by the light of their single candle. Mary practices her reading aloud from a tattered story paper borrowed from a neighbor. The Curse of the Pharaoh. Chapter 3. She reads carefully. Lord Blackwood entered the ancient tomb, his torch casting eerie shadows on the hieroglyphic-covered walls. These penny dreadfuls and story papers are the working-class equivalent of novels. Cheap, sensational, and often gothic or melodramatic. They offer escape and excitement in lives defined by routine and hardship. Tom listens, enthralled, as Mary reads about cursed mummies and brave explorers. These stories offer windows into worlds he'll never see, experiences he'll never have. They're pure fantasy, but they expand his imagination beyond the narrow confines of 7 dials. After the story, perhaps there's music. Tom's father plays a tin whistle, a skill learned in his youth. The tunes are folk songs passed down through generations, played from memory rather than sheet music. The children might sing along or even dance in the small space, creating joy despite their circumstances. By 9 o'clock, the family is preparing for sleep. The single room serves as bedroom for all of them, with privacy a foreign concept. They sleep close for warmth and comfort. The children often piled together on pallets on the floor. This scene, the working-class family gathered around their fire for simple entertainment, became a powerful image in Victorian culture. Middle and upper-class observers often romanticized such moments, seeing in them a pure, uncomplicated happiness supposedly lost to the wealthy in their pursuit of sophisticated pleasures. The reality, of course, was more complex. Yes, there was genuine joy and connection in these family gatherings, but they existed alongside constant anxiety about money, health, and survival. The simplicity was born of necessity, not choice. Sunday brings different leisure patterns for both classes. For you and your wealthy family, Sunday means church attendance. Not just religious observance, but another opportunity for social display. Your family pew, often boxed and sometimes with its own entrance, demonstrates your status in the parish. Your donations support the church and provide moral justification for your privilege. After church comes Sunday dinner, the most formal meal of the week, often with extended family or close friends invited. The afternoon might bring sedate activities considered appropriate for the Sabbath: reading, improving literature, taking a decorous walk. Perhaps sacred music, games, sports, and frivolous entertainments are discouraged, at least in households that maintain proper Victorian piety. For Tom's family, Sunday also centers on church, though their experience differs greatly from yours. They attend a working-class chapel rather than your elegant parish church. The service is longer, the sermon more focused on sin and redemption than on general moral improvement. There are no family pews. Seating is on backless benches with the most desirable spots near the front, often claimed by regular donors of even small amounts. After chapel, Tom's family might splurge on their best meal of the week, perhaps even a small piece of meat, a luxury reserved for Sundays. The afternoon might bring a walk in a public park, if weather permits, or visits with neighbors and relatives. Despite official discouragement of Sunday recreation, working-class neighborhoods often buzz with activity on the one day. Most people have free. One thing about Victorian leisure that always fascinates me is how segregated it was, and yet how certain forms of entertainment crossed class lines. The music hall, for instance, began as working-class entertainment, but eventually attracted middle and even upper-class audiences, though they sat in different sections and attended different venues. Similarly, certain sporting events, particularly horse racing, drew spectators from all classes, though they experienced the events very differently. The wealthy watched from private boxes or members' enclosures, the working class from the cheaper, more crowded general areas. I'm also struck by how communal most Victorian leisure was compared to our often solitary entertainments today. Whether rich or poor, Victorians sought amusement together in theatres, parks, churches, and homes. Few had the private space or resources for entirely solitary pursuits. Even reading, perhaps the most solitary-seeming activity, often happened in shared spaces, and sometimes aloud. Families gathered to hear one member read from a book or newspaper. Public readings by authors like Charles Dickens drew huge crowds from various social classes. The idea of everyone in a household retreating to separate rooms with individual entertainment devices would have seemed bizarre and possibly disturbing to Victorians of any class. As Sunday evening falls on both households, they prepare for the week ahead. Your servants lay out your business attire for Monday, while your wife reviews her social calendar. The machinery of wealthy Victorian life requires constant attention and management, even during ostensible leisure time. In 7 Dials, Tom and his family also prepare for another week of labor. Clothes are laid out, simple meals planned, pennies counted to ensure they'll stretch until the next payday. Their leisure has been brief but real. Moments of joy and connection snatched from lives otherwise defined by work and worry. The contrast in leisure between rich and poor in Victorian England wasn't just about different activities or settings. It was about fundamentally different relationships to time, space, and social expectation. The wealthy had leisure as an expectation, the poor as an exception. The wealthy used leisure to reinforce social bonds and status, the poor to escape, however briefly, from the grinding realities of their existence. Yet in both worlds, people sought the same basic elements in their free time: pleasure, connection, escape, and meaning. The forms differed dramatically, but the underlying human needs remained constant across the vast social divide. In our next chapter, we'll explore perhaps the starkest contrast between rich and poor Victorian lives: health, illness, and medical care. How disease affected different classes, how they sought healing, and how dramatically your chances of survival depended on your social position. It's a sobering but fascinating window into Victorian life and death, where your address often determined whether you lived or died from the same condition. The morning fog hangs heavy over London, seeping through cracks in windows and under doors. It's not just any fog. It's the infamous pea super, a toxic mixture of coal, smoke, and natural mist that turns the air into something you can almost chew. In both our households, yours in Belgravia and Tom's in Seven Dials, someone is coughing. Illness was perhaps the greatest equalizer in Victorian England. Disease could strike anyone, rich or poor. But what happened after you fell ill? That's where the equality ended, and the stark divisions of Victorian society became matters of life and death. In your elegant Belgravia townhouse, it's your youngest child, 4-year-old Charlotte, who wakes with a rattling cough and flushed cheeks. Her nurse notices immediately. She sleeps in an adjoining room specifically to monitor the child through the night. Miss Charlotte seems feverish, my lady. The nurse reports to your wife as soon as she's dressed. I've taken the liberty of sending for Dr. Reynolds. Your wife goes immediately to the nursery, a bright, airy room at the top of the house. Charlotte lies in her small bed, her face unnaturally pink against the white pillowcase. The room is warm from a well-maintained fire, the windows closed against the foggy air outside. "Mama," Charlotte says weakly, reaching out a small hand. "My chest hurts." Your wife takes the child's hand, feeling the unnatural warmth of her skin. "Dr. Reynolds will be here soon, darling. Nurse will bring you some barley water." Within an hour, Dr. Reynolds arrives. He's your family physician, a distinguished gentleman who attended Edinburgh Medical School and maintains a practice exclusively serving wealthy families in Mayfair and Belgravia. His annual retainer alone would feed Tom's family for a year. The doctor is shown directly to the nursery, where he examines Charlotte with careful attention. He listens to her chest with his stethoscope, takes her pulse, examines her throat, and asks detailed questions about her symptoms. "It appears to be bronchitis," he tells your wife. "Not uncommon in this weather, but we must be vigilant. Children can deteriorate quickly." He writes out prescriptions for several medicines: a syrup for the cough, a powder to reduce fever, a tonic to strengthen the system. Your butler will take these to an apothecary immediately, where they'll be prepared with quality ingredients. "I recommend a steam tent for her bed," Dr. Reynolds continues. "The nurse should add a few drops of eucalyptus oil to the water. Keep the room warm but well ventilated. I'll return this evening to check her progress." Your wife nods, already giving instructions to the hovering servants. Within minutes of the doctor's departure, the sick room is a hub of efficient activity. The prescription medicines will arrive shortly. Meanwhile, the kitchen sends up beef tea and calf's foot jelly, traditional invalid foods believed to be strengthening. The housekeeper prepares the steam tent, a frame over Charlotte's bed draped with sheets to create a miniature sauna. Charlotte will be constantly attended by her nurse, with your wife visiting frequently. If needed, a night nurse can be hired to ensure 24-hour care. No expense will be spared for her treatment and comfort. This is illness in a wealthy Victorian household. Prompt medical attention, quality medicines, good nutrition, warm surroundings, and constant care. It doesn't guarantee recovery. Victorian medicine had serious limitations even for the rich, but it offers Charlotte the best possible chance. Now, let's cross London to Seven Dials, where Tom's younger brother, James, also 4, wakes coughing in the night. The sound echoes in the small, damp room where the entire family sleeps. His mother stirs immediately. Maternal vigilance is the same across social classes. She feels his forehead in the darkness. He's burning up, she whispers to her husband. Worse than yesterday, James has been coughing for days. But in poor families, minor illness is often ignored until it becomes serious. They can't afford medicine for every cough and sniffle. They can't miss work to care for mildly sick children. They hope and pray that minor ailments will resolve on their own. But James is clearly getting worse. His breathing is labored, his small chest heaving with the effort. In the dim light of early morning, his mother can see the unnatural flush on his cheeks. "Should we call the parish doctor?" Tom asks, now awake and watching his brother with concern. His mother sighs. The parish doctor provides free care to the poor, but he's notoriously overworked and often dismissive. Getting his attention might require hours of waiting at his office. Hours. Tom's mother can't spare from her washing work without losing essential income. "I'll try Mrs. Wilson first," she decides. She helped the Parkers' girl last winter. Mrs. Wilson is the neighborhood's unofficial healer. Not a trained doctor or even a midwife, but a woman with some knowledge of traditional remedies and enough experience to recognize common illnesses. In poor communities, such women often provide the first and sometimes only medical attention families receive. As dawn breaks, Tom is sent to fetch Mrs. Wilson. He finds her already attending another sick child 2 streets away. When she finally arrives, she examines James with experienced hands. "Bronchitis, most like," she pronounces. "Going around with this weather. He needs mustard plasters for his chest and hound tea for the cough." She leaves instructions for preparing these home remedies. Unlike Dr. Reynolds' prescriptions, these treatments use inexpensive ingredients available in most kitchens or purchasable for a few pennies. The mustard plaster, a paste of ground mustard seed applied to the chest, acts as a counter-irritant, drawing blood to the skin's surface. The hound tea is an herbalant to loosen phlegm. "Keep him warm as you can," Mrs. Wilson advises, "and try to get some broth in him. If he starts breathing real fast or his lips go blue, you'll need the hospital." This last suggestion carries its own dread. Victorian hospitals for the poor were places of last resort, often more feared than welcomed. The conditions were grim, the care minimal, and many entered never to return. Unlike Charlotte, James won't have a dedicated nurse. His mother must continue her washing work. The family can't survive without her income. Mary will stay home from school to watch him, doing her best with the limited instructions and resources available. The sick room is the same room where they all live, sleep, cook, and eat. The air is damp and chilled, except near their small fire, which they can't afford to keep burning all day. The only food available is the same inadequate fare. Always eat bread, tea, perhaps a bit of broth made from bones if they're lucky. Isn't it wild how the same illness could play out so differently based on your address? Bronchitis, basically the same bug infecting both children. But one gets a doctor, medicine, round-clock care, and every comfort, while the other gets homemade remedies and a scared sister watching over him while everyone else works. And what gets me is that the Victorians didn't see this as particularly unfair. They had this concept called the deserving poor. People who were poor through no fault of their own and thus deserved charity. But even for them, the assumption wasn't that they should receive the same level of care as the wealthy. just that they should receive something rather than nothing. Let me tell you about a specific treatment that really shows this divide. Take something like a tuberculosis diagnosis. If you were wealthy and got TB in the later Victorian period, your doctor might prescribe a stay at a sanatorium, basically a specialized hospital, usually in the mountains or countryside where the air was clean. You'd rest in comfort, eat excellent food, and take gentle exercise under medical supervision. Many people recovered. If you were poor, you'd keep working until you physically couldn't anymore, spreading the disease to your family in your crowded home. When you became too sick to work, you might end up in a workhouse infirmary, where you'd receive basic care at best, while being surrounded by other sick people in a crowded ward. Recovery rates were unsurprisingly much lower. Back in Belgravia, Dr. Reynolds returns that evening as promised to check on Charlotte. Her condition has stabilized. Not improved dramatically, but not worsened. This is considered good news. Continue the treatments, he tells your wife. I'm cautiously optimistic. Children have remarkable resilience. He leaves additional medicines and instructions for the night. The household adjusts to the situation with practiced efficiency. Dinner is served as usual for you and any guests, though your wife may take a tray in the nursery to remain near Charlotte. The routine of the house continues, largely uninterrupted, with dedicated staff handling the crisis. You visit Charlotte's bedside briefly before retiring. Papa, she smiles weakly, reaching for your hand. Her small fingers feel hot against your palm. Be a good girl and take your medicine, you tell her, patting her hand somewhat awkwardly. Victorian fathers, particularly in upper-class families, often maintained a certain emotional distance from their children, especially daughters. In your world, illness is concerning, but not catastrophic. You have resources to provide the best available care. You don't face financial ruin from medical expenses or lost work. The household can absorb the disruption without fundamental threat to its functioning. In 7 Dials, night falls on a very different scene. James' condition has worsened despite the mustard plasters and hooned tea. His breathing is more labored, his fever higher. Tom's mother has returned from her washing work to find Mary nearly in tears with worry. He won't drink anything, Mary reports, and he's burning up something awful. Their mother feels James's forehead, her face tightening with fear. This is the moment every poor Victorian parent dreads, when illness moves beyond what home remedies can address, when expensive professional care becomes not a luxury, but a necessity for survival. Tom, run for Dr. Harper, she decides, naming the parish doctor. Tell him it's urgent. Tom dashes into the night through dark streets where even in illness, class divisions hold firm. The poor get sick in crowded, unsanitary neighborhoods where disease spreads rapidly. They seek treatment in different facilities with different standards of care. They even die of different diseases, or rather of the same diseases, but in vastly different proportions. Dr. Harper's small office is crowded even at this late hour. Mothers hold coughing children. Men sit with injuries from the day's labor. The elderly wait with various chronic ailments. Tom pushes his way to the harried receptionist. Please, miss. My brother's real bad with the bronchitis. My mum says, can Dr. Harper come? The woman barely looks up from her ledger. Doctor doesn't make house calls after hours except for emergencies. Bring the child in tomorrow. But he's really sick, Tom insists. He can't hardly breathe. Something in his voice makes the woman look up properly. She sigh. Wait here. She disappears into a back room, returning moments later. Doctor says, if it's that urgent, take him to the Children's Hospital on Great Ormond Street. He's too busy here. The Children's Hospital opened in 1852 as the first hospital in Britain. Specifically for children, is a beacon of hope for poor families. Unlike many hospitals, it doesn't require payment or parish recommendations for emergency cases. But it's a long walk from 7 Dials, and taking a gravely ill child through cold night air seems dangerous. Tom returns home with this mixed news. His mother's face falls. It's too far to carry him tonight, she decides after checking James again. We'll keep up with the remedies and take him first thing tomorrow if he's no better. This is the impossible calculus of poverty and illness, weighing risks against limited options, making medical decisions based not just on need, but on cost, distance, time away from work, and care for other children. Throughout the night, Tom's mother sits beside James, bathing his forehead with vinegar water to reduce the fever, applying fresh mustard plasters, and coaxing sips of water whenever possible. The rest of the family sleeps fitfully around them in the single room, everyone aware of the labored breathing that seems to fill the space. By morning, James is slightly improved, his fever lower, his breathing less troubled. The crisis passes without hospital intervention, but this is luck, not medical care. Many children in similar circumstances weren't so fortunate. Victorian London's mortality statistics tell the stark story. In wealthy neighbourhoods like Belgravia, about 15 out of every 1,000 people died each year. In poor areas like 7 Dials or Whitechapel, the rate was often double that, 30 per 1,000 or higher. The difference was particularly dramatic for children. In some poor districts, 1/3 of children died before their FTH birthday, while rich families expected most children to survive to adulthood. These differences weren't just about medical care after illness struck. They reflected the entire physical environment of rich and poor lives. The wealthy had clean water from private wells or filtered sources, while the poor often relied on polluted public pumps. The wealthy had proper sewage disposal. The poor lived with open drains and cesspools. The wealthy ate varied, nutritious diets. The poor subsisted on whatever they could afford, often lacking essential nutrients. Housing conditions played perhaps the largest role in health disparities. Your Belgravia home is spacious, allowing physical distance between household members when one is ill. It's well ventilated when needed and warm when required. It's built of quality materials without the dampness that contributes to respiratory disease. Tom's family's single room offers no such protections. Disease spreads rapidly among people sleeping in the same small space. Dampness from poor construction and inadequate heating creates perfect conditions for tuberculosis, pneumonia, and bronchitis. Ventilation is limited, trapping contaminated air. Public health reformers of the Victorian era increasingly recognized these connections between environment and health. Dr. John Snow's famous investigation of the 1854 Broad Street cholera outbreak demonstrated that disease wasn't simply a matter of individual susceptibility or moral failing as many Victorians believed, but was directly linked to environmental factors like contaminated water. These discoveries gradually led to municipal improvements, better sewage systems, cleaner water supplies, regulations on housing conditions, but progress was slow and unevenly distributed. The wealthy neighborhoods saw improvements first, while poor areas remained dangerous well into the late Victorian period. As our 2 sick children recover, Charlotte with professional medical help and every comfort, James, through a combination of home remedies and good fortune. They carry different lessons from their illnesses. Charlotte learns that sickness brings attention and care, that pain is quickly addressed, that adults can control and mitigate suffering. James learns that illness is frightening and potentially deadly, that relief may be limited or unavailable, that sometimes you must simply endure. These different experiences shape their understanding of their bodies and their place in the world. They contribute to the vastly different psychology of rich and poor in Victorian society. One group expecting control and resolution, the other expecting hardship and uncertainty. By the following weekend, both children have recovered from their bouts of bronchitis. Charlotte receives a new doll as a getting well present and returns to her lessons with her the episode already fading from her memory. James returns to helping his mother with small tasks. His recovery unremarked except in his family's private relief. Life continues in both households, the patterns of privilege and deprivation unaltered, the vast gulf between their experiences unchanged. But in both homes, parents glance more frequently at their children, listening for the sound of coughing in the night. Illness is the shadow that never completely leaves Victorian life, regardless of social class. In our final chapter, we'll observe evening rituals in both households. How the day ends for rich and poor, what dreams and fears accompany them into sleep, and how even in unconsciousness, the divisions of Victorian society persist in the very nature of rest itself. The day fades into evening across London. Gas lamps flicker to life along fashionable streets, while in poorer neighborhoods, darkness gathers in corners and alleys. As night falls, both our households prepare for evening, the final act in the daily performance of Victorian life, where even the rituals of rest reflect the vast divides we've explored. In your Belgravia townhouse, dinner is the centerpiece of evening. It's served at 8, a fashionably late hour that distinguishes the truly wealthy from the merely comfortable. Middle classes who might dine at 6 or 7. The dining room glows with light from crystal, chandeliers and silver candles. The long mahogany table gleams, set with damask linen, fine china, crystal glasses, and more silverware than most poor families would own in their entire lives. Each place setting includes multiple forks, knives, and spoons. Specialized utensils for specific foods that would bewilder anyone not schooled in upper-class dining customs. Tonight, you're hosting a small dinner, just 8 guests, including Lord and Lady West and their daughter, Lady Elizabeth. The young woman has been seated beside you, a deliberate arrangement by your wife that hasn't escaped your notice. "I hear you're quite the horsewoman, Lady Elizabeth," you remark as the first course is served. A clear soup in delicate china bowls. She smiles demurely. "I'm fond of riding, though I wouldn't claim any special skill." Her modesty does her credit, interjects her father from across the table. But Elizabeth has exceptional seat, takes after her mother. The conversation continues in this vein, light, pleasant, carefully avoiding controversial topics. Politics might be discussed among the gentlemen later, but mixed company at dinner requires safer subjects. Recent social events, mutual acquaintances, art, music, perhaps a little gentle gossip about absent friends. The meal unfolds with choreographed precision. Footmen in livery serve each course, moving silently around the table, offering dishes from the left, removing plates from the right. The food itself is elaborate. 8 or more courses prepared by your French chef and a staff of 3 kitchen maids. After soup comes fish, then a meat course, followed by a sorbet to cleanse the palate, then game or poultry, then vegetable dishes, then sweet puddings, fruit, nuts, and finally cheese. Each course is accompanied by an appropriate wine selected by your butler and decanted hours earlier to breathe properly. The entire production represents an enormous expenditure of money, time, and labor, not just in the meal itself, but in the years of training required for everyone involved. From the chef creating sauces to the footmen who've practiced their silent service to perfection, Lady Elizabeth navigates the meal with practiced ease, taking small portions, eating delicately, and never appearing too enthusiastic about the food. Vulgar hunger has no place in upper-class femininity. She's performing the role she's been trained for since childhood. The perfect society wife, accomplished, pleasing, and decorative. I was at Lady Pembroke's musical evening last week, she mentions between courses. Your wife's performance on the pianoforte was quite wonderful. You're too kind, your wife responds from the head of the table. I fear I've had little time to practice lately. This modest denial of skill is also part of the performance. Acknowledging compliments too enthusiastically would seem conceited. The intricate social dance continues through every course, exhausting in its complexity, yet second nature to those raised within it. After dinner, another ritual unfolds. The ladies withdraw to the drawing room, leaving the gentlemen to port and cigars. This gendered separation allows for different conversations, business and politics among the men, household matters, and social concerns among the women. In the drawing room, your wife presides over the coffee service, a silver pot poured into delicate cups. Lady Westmand settles beside her on the sofa. Elizabeth seems quite taken with your husband. She observes quietly, watching her daughter arrange her skirts on a chair nearby. Your wife sips her coffee. He speaks highly of her, and Lord James seemed quite attentive at the opera. Lady Westmand smiles. James is attentive to many young ladies. His position allows some latitude in that regard. The implication is clear. As a younger son without title or significant inheritance, Lord James can flirt, but must eventually marry money. Lady Elizabeth, as an earl's daughter, must marry at least equal rank. These calculations underlie every social interaction in their world. Meanwhile, in the dining room, you and the other gentlemen have moved to clustered leather chairs. Your butler circulates with port and a box of Cuban cigars. Lord Westend accepts both, settling in comfortably. Concerning situation in the Punjab, he remarks now that the ladies have departed could affect cotton prices significantly if it deteriorates. The conversation shifts to business and politics. East India Company concerns, parliamentary matters, investment opportunities. These discussions are as much a part of dinner as the food itself, the real purpose behind the social gathering for many gentlemen. Across London, in 7 Dials, evening brings a very different ritual. Tom's family gathers around their small fire as darkness falls. Their supper is simple, perhaps a thin vegetable soup with a crust of bread, nothing requiring elaborate preparation or service. They eat from mismatched bowls with worn metal spoons sitting on whatever makeshift seating their single room affords. Perhaps a small bench, a couple of stools, some sitting on upturned crates. There's no tablecloth, no separate courses, no servants to wait on them. Found a good piece today, Tom's father says, producing a slightly bent metal bracket from his pocket. He works as a scavenger along the Thames shoreline at low tide, searching for anything saleable among the debris, metal scraps, coal pieces, lost valuables, if he's exceptionally lucky. What's it from, Da? Tom asks, examining the object with interest. Ship fitting, I reckon. Brass, so it'll fetch a few pence. This small triumph, finding something worth a few coins, is cause for genuine celebration. There's pride in his voice, despite the humble nature of the discovery. In their world, such small victories can make the difference between eating and going hungry. After their simple meal, the evening continues with shared work and occasional recreation. Tom's mother mends clothing by firelight, squinting at the tiny stitches. His father whittles a small wooden toy for the youngest child. A rare moment of creativity amid the pragmatic focus on survival. Mary practices her reading, sounding out words from a tattered pamphlet distributed by Sunday school. Education continues in these evening hours. Fitted around work requirements, rather than forming the center of children's days as in wealthy households. Tom himself might be, repairing his shoes with scraps of leather found in the streets, or helping his father sort the day's scavenged findings. Even in their limited leisure, productivity remains essential. Idle hands are a luxury the poor can't afford. Yet there are moments of simple pleasure. Perhaps Tom's father tells stories of his rural childhood, tales of farm animals and country superstitions that seem exotic to children raised in London's crowded streets. Perhaps there's singing. Folk songs pass through generations, music requiring no instruments or formal training. Tell us about the ghost horse again, Da. The youngest child pleads, eyes wide in the firelight. Tom's father smiles. Well, now in the village where I grew up, there was said to be a great white horse that appeared on misty nights. These oral traditions, ghost stories, folk tales, family histories form the evening entertainment. No books are purchased, no theatre tickets bought, no elaborate games played. Yet the intimacy of these shared stories creates genuine connection. The family's evening will end early, constrained by practical considerations. Candles and lamp oil are expensive. Firelight must suffice for most activities, and early morning work requires early sleep. There's no leisurely breakfast awaiting them, no servants to ease the transition into a new day. As the fire burns down to embers, preparations for sleep begin. There are no elaborate bedrooms, no dressing rooms or personal servants. The entire family sleeps in the single room, perhaps with a curtain drawn across for minimal privacy. Washing is limited by the availability of water and heat. A small basin might be filled for the most basic ablutions, faces and hands cleaned. But full bathing is a rare event, usually weekly at best. Night clothes, if they exist separately from day wear, are simple and often shared or handed down. Nighttime in a poor Victorian home brings its own discomforts and dangers. The room grows cold as the fire dies with inadequate blankets to keep out the chill. Street noise continues. Arguments, drunken singing, occasional violence. Rats and insects are unwelcome companions, particularly in basement dwellings like Tom's. Yet even here there are rituals of comfort. A mother's hand smoothing a child's hair, a father's gruff good night, siblings nestled together for warmth. The fundamental human need for connection and security finds expression even in the harshest circumstances. Back in Belgravia, your evening continues at a stately pace. The gentlemen eventually rejoin the ladies in the drawing room for music and conversation. Perhaps your daughter Emma performs on the piano, demonstrating the accomplishments that mark her as a properly educated young lady. There might be card games for those who enjoy them. Whist or bezique played for small stakes that are nonetheless significant sums to someone of Tom's. Class. By 11, your guests begin to depart. Carriages are called, wraps fetched by waiting servants, elaborate farewells exchanged with promises of future engagements. The social performance continues until the final guest crosses your threshold. Once alone with your wife, there's perhaps a brief review of the evening. I thought Lady Elizabeth seemed quite charming. She might comment as you climb the sweeping staircase to your respective bedrooms. Indeed, you reply non-committee. Lord Westmand had some interesting insights about the cotton markets. This oblique communication, neither of you directly mentioning the matrimonial possibilities being explored, is typical of your relationship. Direct discussion of emotions or intimate matters would seem vulgar even between husband and wife. You separate at the landing, each to your own bedroom, the arrangement typical of wealthy Victorian marriages. Sharing a bedroom would be considered unusual except among the lower classes, who had no choice due to space limitations. Your valet Jenkins awaits in your dressing room, ready to assist with the complicated process of undressing. The formal evening clothes you wear require assistance to remove properly, studs to be extracted from shirt fronts, cufflinks to be stored, boots to be pulled off with special jacks. Was the evening satisfactory, sir? Jenkins asks as he helps you into your nightshirt. Quite adequate, you reply. Lady Westmand seemed pleased with the 47 club. This subtle communication between master and servant contains volumes of unspoken meaning. Jenkins knows which guests are being courted for which purposes, which alliances are being formed or dissolved. His discretion is absolute, another privilege your wealth purchases. Once prepared for bed, you settle into your massive four-poster with its down mattress and fine linen sheets. Perhaps you read for a while political journals or reports from your estate manager. Your bedroom, like all rooms in your home, serves a single specialized purpose. It's a space solely for sleeping and dressing, not the multifunctional room that poorer families inhabit. Meanwhile, your wife undergoes her own elaborate bedtime ritual, assisted by her lady's maid. Her hair is brushed 100 strokes, her face cleaned with special creams, her corset removed with probable relief after hours of constriction. She too might read before extinguishing her lamp. Perhaps a novel by Dickens or Eliot, or a ladies' magazine with fashion plates and household hints. The separate bedrooms don't necessarily preclude marital relations. You might visit her room or she yours for those purposes. But the default is separate, sleeping with privacy and distance maintained even in intimacy. As midnight approaches, both households fall silent. Sleep comes to rich and poor alike, though in vastly different surroundings. The wealthy rest in isolated comfort in rooms designed exclusively for sleep, with servants nearby to address any midnight needs. The poor sleep communally in spaces that serve multiple functions, vulnerable to cold noise and disturbance. Yet in sleep, some of the stark divisions of Victorian society temporarily dissolve. Dreams come to all classes, carrying sleepers beyond the rigid boundaries of their waking lives. For a few hours, the strictures of class, the limitations of circumstance, the weight of social expectations might lift. Tom might dream of open skies and clean air. Far from London smoke, you might dream of simpler pleasures than your regimented social life allows. In the democracy of dreams, Victorian hierarchies momentarily fade, but morning will come, and with it the return of the divided world we've explored, the parallel lives of Victorian London's richest and poorest residents. Lives that occasionally intersected but rarely truly touched. Lives shaped by birth and circumstance more than individual choice or effort. The Victorian era was a time of extreme contrasts. unimaginable luxury alongside desperate poverty, rigid moral codes alongside rampant exploitation, scientific progress alongside primitive conditions. These contradictions define the age and continue to fascinate us today. As you lie in your comfortable modern bed, perhaps give a thought to which Victorian life yours might more closely resemble had you been born in that era. The odds overwhelmingly favor the poorer existence. The vast majority of Victorians lived lives of hardship rather than privilege. Your comfortable bed, your private space, your full stomach, your access to healthcare. These would have been unattainable luxuries for most people in Victorian England. And yet, in some ways, we still live in a world shaped by Victorian ideas and structures. Their concepts of class and worth, their approaches to work and leisure, their assumptions about gender and power continue to influence our society, often in ways we don't fully recognize. Perhaps that's why stories of Victorian life continue to captivate us. They offer both the comfort of distance, look how far we've come, and the discomfort of recognition, look how much remains the same. They show us both progress and stagnation, both change and continuity. As you drift towards sleep, carry with you these images of Victorian lives. The silk-curtained four-poster and the shared pallet on the floor, the elaborate dinner party and the simple bread and soup, the specialized education and the stolen moments of learning. They form part of the long human story that continues to unfold, connecting us to those who came before and those who will follow. The gas lamps of Victorian London have long since dimmed. The grand townhouses have been divided into apartments, the slums demolished and rebuilt. But the stories remain whispered through time like the evening tales by Tom's fireside or decaful conversations in your elegant drawing room. Let those whispers accompany you into sleep, a gentle reminder of our shared human experience across time and circumstance. Rest easy in your comfortable modern bed, free from the constraints and hardships that define so many Victorian lives. Sleep peacefully knowing that while the past shaped us, it need not limit